I clock here so that I don't run long, but I understand I have some extra time. So I may stretch out just a little bit, just a little bit. Dan and I go back a few years. We have been meeting over at Tony's Restaurant. Anybody know where Tony's Restaurant is on Broadway? Yeah, okay. Well, we've been meeting there for the past few years, having these fabulous conversations, very extensive, and we get work done in between all of that time as well. And he says that we're co-partners, really, in this organization called Co-Lead, but we're also partners in Tony's Restaurant, I would think. We have spent more money at Tony's, we should be partners. They see us come in, they're looking, and they're going, all right, we can make payroll this week. Here comes Chet and Dan. We love going over there, and we enjoy the time. Dan's been going over there longer than I. In fact, if you look in the back, they have a giant picture of Dan with incense burning, and they sacrifice small animals. I'm kidding about the small animals. Anybody from PETA in here? I don't want anybody throwing any blood on me as I walk out. He hates animals. I love animals. No, we love Tony's, so it's just been our place. We enjoy it very much. But I didn't come here to talk about Tony's, although the food is good. I really am here to talk about this whole aspect of this giant change that is gripping the world as we speak. In fact, it's driving our politics. The reason why you see these quote-unquote insurgent candidates, as it were, is because there is change that's happening, and honestly, we haven't been able to kind of wrap our arms around it because very few people are articulating it as such. That's my job. I'm what they call a social futurist. My job is to talk about the things that are going to happen in the next 5 to 7 years and how they will impact us. You'll hear other futurists talk about flying cars and the Jetsons and, robots taking over. That's fine. I leave that to them, but my job really is to focus on what is happening to us in this really short window. So I'm going to get to it by talking about how I arrived at this place of realizing that we are standing at the greatest time in human history. One of the greatest times, if not the greatest time in human history. I have a family member who was going through substance abuse. And all during that time, I remember the doctor saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do an intervention. Anybody ever been involved in an intervention? Okay, well, some of you who know that it happens on Dr. Phil, but not necessarily in real life. It's tough. It's a tough experience, and they rarely work out with everybody coming home hugging and saying, yes, we found the way forward. It's tougher than that. It's a longer, more detailed journey. So we did that, and of course it turned out that way. And then the doctor said to me, you're going to have to help. You're going to have to manage this thing. And what they recommended was a program called Al-Anon. Anybody familiar with that? Al-Anon is a wonderful program that helps those of us who love those who are going through substance abuse to be able to manage it a lot better. So one of the guys that, actually it was referred to me, Al-Anon was referred to me by Darlene Rivera, the person who introduced Dan and I. And she said, go and just see what you think. So I went, and one of the things that the person there said was, you did the whole aspect of the intervention. That's great. Now you're going to have to do something else. You're going to have to now create a vision of your life going forward that is affirmative and empowering. It includes them, but it doesn't get you caught up into their web. That is, you acknowledge the fact that this is a family member, they are going through their challenges, but your job is now to create another vision of your future going forward that is empowering and that will lift you up so that you will be able to be of assistance to them at some point in time in the future. But the most important thing was to create a new future for you. So when I started thinking about that a lot, because I started realizing how important it is that a lot of times we rage against the machine. There are things that we don't like, and we look around us and we say, this is not working. So we do an intervention. We go and we petition and we say, hey, this has to change. But yet after a while, you start realizing that maybe the intervention doesn't work. And when that happens, then you have to take the next step, what I call the Al-Anon approach. You have to start to say, what happens if we create another vision that doesn't exclude that which exists, but definitely creates another path for you going forward? And that is what I submit now that has to happen in the world that we're in. I was reading some more about the Panama Papers and some of the other challenges that are out there, and racial injustice, and the mass criminal, the mass incarceration process, and all of these other things that are going on. And I kept thinking to myself, we're better than this. We're better than this. We have more access to information than all of the generations combined. We have more power in our smartphones than the Apollo ship that landed on the moon. We have more connection to people all around the world than at any other time in human history, known human history, through the internet and travel. We have the greatest technology we could ever imagine. Guess what? We can do better than this. If we have challenges, it is not beyond us to create something else. Our challenge is that we haven't gone to the Al-Anon process of creating the vision going forward. So without that, we're stuck doing the intervention. Now, there's a statement that I want you to wrap your arms around, because it is at the heart and soul of what Dan and I do, really. I'm a graduate of Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, home of the Salukis. Really? Are you kidding me? Okay. I'm like, who goes to SIUC? Well, I know who goes to SIUC. Oh, really? And the great philosopher and geodesic dome designer, Buckminster Fuller. So Buckminster Fuller made this statement, and it resonates so richly in the world today. And he says, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that'll make the existing model obsolete. We now live in a time where we know that there are models that are not working. That doesn't mean that all of us are suffering or going through challenges, but we can do better. Being better is not something to be feared. It is not something that we see as a challenge to us. It actually means that since we have more resources at our disposal, we can be better. And so when I started thinking about that, I want you to hold on to that statement, because there's one other story I want to mention before I talk about the changes that are directly happening. I was a volunteer at the Samaritan House Homeless Shelter for 12 years. 12 years as a volunteer life coach teacher. Now, prior to that, I was in advertising. I had an advertising agency by the name of CBO Worldwide. We did very well throughout the country. In fact, some of our clients included the Rocky Mountain News, the Denver Post, Austin American Statesman, Omaha World Herald, Chicago Tribune. We actually had a client in Germany called Süddeutsche Zeitung, the paper of the people. We were all over the place, massive. For about 10 years, we had a really good run. After 9/11, the company, everybody quit advertising. Next few years, because of the fact that newspapers were consolidating and everybody quit reading newspapers, quite frankly, we went out of business. That forced me to rethink what I wanted to be when I grew up. So my grandmother said, why don't you go and help somebody? So I started volunteering at the Samaritan House Homeless Shelter. I went in and I started volunteering as the life coach and started telling people how to fill out applications, how to apply for jobs, how to get housing. Well, the problem with that, of course, is that people would come in and they'd do their thing 3 months with us, They'd leave. 6 months later, they were back at the shelter. And I'd ask them, I said, why are you back here? And they'd say, well, I don't know. And really, they didn't know. The challenge was their vision of who they were had not changed. So I went to Father Michael and I said, you know, this we're like cycling. This isn't working. This isn't effective. And he said, well, the poor you have with you always. And I said, what does that mean? We're supposed to agree to that? And he said, well, Chad, if you can come up with a better idea, I'm certainly open. So I decided, I was reading at the time, because my brother is a physicist, and he came to me and he said, hey, man, you got to read this stuff about quantum physics. And everything from the Heisenberg principle of uncertainty to chaos theory to Schrodinger's cat. I mean, we were covering everything. And I decided I was going to teach that at the homeless shelter. Walk into the shelter and I said, guess what, everybody? We're talking about, from now on, we're going to talk about quantum physics. Guy sits in the back and he says, and how is that going to help me get a job? And I said, simple. One of the things that I discovered about the whole aspect of quantum physics is that it is the science of possibilities. Once you recognize the core aspect of quantum physics, that all possibilities exist at the same time, that you have to make a decision about what those possibilities will be, then you start to realize that all possibilities exist at the same time. So all we did was start to talk about possibilities and creating vision out of that possibility. Next thing you know, we were being written up in the Wall Street Journal, the Rocky Mountain News. I was honored as one of the 9 Who Cares of the 9 Who Cares Award, all because we started talking about something that was above and beyond what the students were used to at the shelter. We even did a test and we found out that the people we did a year study along with DU, the people at DU, they did a wonderful job of helping us with this. An observational study of 50 students, 50 who went through our class, 50 who did not. The 50 who did not were 37% less likely to return to homelessness simply because they had a different vision of what they saw for themselves and in the world. They made basically the existing model of what they understood as true obsolete simply because they challenged it and they were not afraid. So now we live in this place where Buckminster Fuller's words are more important than any other time. It was that particular experience at the shelter that made me realize, hey, we have to apply some of that particular power and knowledge in the world today because we can do better. There is no excuse for us not to be better than any other time in human history. Again, we have more resources and more things happening. Now let me tell you a little bit about the shift that is happening. There is a dramatic shift that is happening in the world that is going to require a different kind of vision. And none of us can say, well, Chet, that's maybe for the young people. It's not for me. Oh, yes, it's for you too. Because as a social futurist, I want to remind you that my job is to make sure that we understand what's going to be happening over the next 5 to 7 years. Not 50 years from now. In the next 5 to 7 years, and chances are good most of you will be here during that particular space. Here are the challenges that are happening that we have to start developing a different kind of vision for so that we can make the old ways obsolete. There's the rise of the sharing economy. There's an economy that is emerging in the world now where we're starting, and I tend to think of it as the rescue for free enterprise, but it is an economy that is emerging all around the world that's saying, all of us have the opportunity to participate, and we get a chance not necessarily to buy something, but to rent it or share it. That is becoming one of the biggest trends, and it's helping to develop these new entrepreneurs that were one time closed out of the whole aspect of participating in free enterprise simply because they didn't have the money. Free enterprise has a way of saying, or the current system has a way of saying, if you don't have the capital, you can't participate. You can get a job, but you can't participate. So now we have, again, the sharing economy says there's more room for more of us to participate, all shoulders at the wheel. There's the growth of feminine principled leadership. Remember the three things that your mother used to tell you when you were a kid? Share your stuff, be kind to others, and make sure you have clean underwear. I didn't get that clean underwear part. I never did figure that one out. But that was the part that mothers used to say to us. That's what they call feminine principles. Now we're starting to realize that the whole aspect of sharing our stuff and being kind to others used to be considered what they used to call the soft skills. That those kinds of things, okay, that's nice, but in order to be successful in business, you have to be hard and directed and these kinds of things. In a connected world, where now you are connected to people all around the world and as well as in your community, you have to be nice, at least to the point where you're social, because you are now connected. That's when the soft skills now become really important. Being able to share your stuff and being able to be kind with others. There's the expansion of the Internet of Things. Some of you haven't heard that term yet, but I assure you, you will be hearing about it over the next 5 to 7 years. The Internet of Things means the automation of everything. Remember the whole aspect of the Jetsons? Anybody watch the Jetsons when you were a kid? I did. George and his wife and the dog and the maid, Rosie, I think her name was. Well, people were like, back in the day, we were like, oh, that's the kind of future that we want. True, that future is about to arrive. It is going to be in our lives in full effect over the next 5 to 7 years. The challenge with that, of course, is that that kind of automated world is going to put a lot of people out of work. It's going to make a lot of jobs obsolete. You haven't seen it yet, but I assure you, the disruption that you saw in China just last week, some of the other things that are happening in our world today, why a lot of the jobs have been downsized, is because of the fact that automation is about to take a next giant leap. They call it the first wave. There are actually 3 waves that will be happening. And it's not just about service jobs. It will be about management jobs as well, because of the Jetson world that we saw in the cartoons is now about to become our reality. Look it up, Google it, the Internet of Things. There's another thing that's happening, and that is this emergence of a world philosophy called Ubuntu. I've traveled to 26 different countries around the world, and one of the things that I keep hearing is this whole discussion about Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a South African philosophy that says, I am because we are because I am. In other words, all of us are connected, and our value is connected and directed by all of us, in the sense that I am valuable because you are valuable. You are valuable because I am. I am important because you are important because I am. That's a different kind of conversation than rugged individualism, which said, I got mine, good luck to you. Ubuntu says, now it's time for us to recognize that our greatest strength is in our connection to each other. Some of you have probably been reading a lot of the science digests over the past 5 years, and they've been saying the same thing over and over again. Humankind survived the great challenges when humankind was first growing up because we learned how to connect and work with each other. It's the opposite. The people who did not survive, the Neanderthals, who said that we don't need to be connected, that eventually met their demise in that philosophy. The philosophy of connectedness is the most powerful one. It means that we will all survive this thing together. We all have the resources we can pool together to become great. There is the philosophy or the leadership movement, the lateral leadership movement, where we used to work from a hierarchy. Now we're starting to realize that we have to move from leader to leadership. That means everybody is responsible in the leadership model. There are no free lunches. People don't sit around and hope for the best. It means all of us now engage in the leadership as opposed to leaving it to a particular person to do that. So those are some of the major ones in my book. I talk about 50 of these great trends that are happening all around the world, and we're seeing here in the United States in earnest. And people say, well, I don't understand what a paradigm shift is, Chet. That doesn't make any sense. Well, let me just give you some examples. I was going to say, remember the agricultural to industrial shift? But most of you probably weren't around then. But there was a great shift. And if you read your history, you read about the Luddites out of England. And one of the things that they used to talk about was, the technology will ruin everything. We need to be an agricultural world. We can't do this whole thing with the technology and such. Well, we made it. We made the trip from an agrarian society to an industrial society. Then there was another shift from an industrial society to the information age. There were the same people talking about the same thing, saying, Chet, I don't think we're going to make it. It's not good for us to move from industrial to information. But we made the trip, albeit a bumpy trip indeed. Now the next paradigm shift is about to occur, and that's the one that says we move from the information age to what we call the Enlightenment Empowerment Age. The stuff that we used to leave to clerks and companies and other people, we now can do from our smartphone. The things that we used to say, I want somebody else to do, we now have the power to do it ourselves. Once they work out some of the kinks in the whole aspect of voting, you're going to see an ability for us to be able to vote directly from our smartphones. That's a lot of work that has to go into that. But all of those things are happening that means that we can't check out. There was a time when we could say, well, I just hope for the best. You won't be able to check out in the world to come. You must check in. You must become a part of it. It can't be about a leader. It must be about all of us engaging in leadership. So this perfect storm that's happening, and I'll wrap up here, that of more people connected around the world than any other time in human history. The technological wave that's happening that will change everything that we know in the next 5 to 7 years, and we have more access to information than any other time in human history, only means, again, we have the opportunity to make models that don't work obsolete. We must do better. It is an obligation that we have to ourselves as well as to our children, because when they look back years from now and they ask the question, there was this huge window, this paradigm shift that happened during that time. Folks, what did you do? And if you say, well, I went to go play golf. Now, don't get me wrong, I love golf just as much as anybody else, but there is another part of our lives that has to be at play, and that is we have to engage. We actually have to step into this world because it is requiring us to do that, to leverage this great storm that has come together specifically for this time so that we can be the greatest people and the greatest generation that we've ever imagined. This is it. This is that time. We are the ones that we have been waiting for. The millennials are asking that question. What will you do? And I submit to you, you have everything that you need. I'll take any questions. Anyone? I can't quite see. Oh, there we go.
Chat here, please.
Okay. Yes.
Hi. Based on your premise, we're doomed. If you look at our politics, we write down party lines. No one's working together. So how do we break that up?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I mentioned earlier, that the insurgency that they speak of truly is a measure of people saying, this can't be right. This isn't working. And a lot of times people will say that, particularly they'll say these things about the young people and say that young people really don't research this stuff, so they really don't know. Guess what? Young people do more research than we ever did. They get on and they Google stuff and they will go and check out 5, 7 stories on average just to figure out if you're telling the truth. So what is going to happen, in my opinion, is that there may be a level of insurgency in the political scene that will change everything this fall. This is a historic year, and take note. And let me just say this, even if a traditional candidate gets in, that's not going to stop this insurgency, and I'm not sure if I should use that term because that sounds militaristic. It's not. It's only that people are saying stuff ain't working. And there are people who want to insult their intelligence by saying, you don't know what you're talking about. They do know what they're talking about. When people are upset, they're not lying. They are upset. They think that something is not right. And it's our job to make sure that we give those people voice and we pay attention to what's happening. And then we start to find ways of bridging those gaps. So I believe that there might be a traditional candidate that gets in, but that's not going to stop the process. This has been a long process in the works, so it's not going to end with the election. There may be something else that occurs by the time before even the next election cycle that will be significant. The millennials are already planning for post-election. They're already in the works for that, so it's not going to be the typical election cycle anymore. Yes?
Question.
Yes.
I'm an optimist like you are.
Yes.
Recently I read a book by a couple of MIT professors called The Second Machine Age. It talked about the rollout of digitalization, and that digitalization, in fact, will have the same huge impact on productivity and as we did in the industrial age when it started with the steam engine, but pretty soon there were 1,000 technologies that evolved, and so too from digitalization. Are you familiar with this, thinking about digitalization being a key part of the growth and expansion economically of the world?
Absolutely. It is part of the whole aspect of the automation of things that there is. Here's where the great challenge that's coming up. If you look at your stats, you see that American productivity has been growing dramatically over the past 10 to 15 years. But yet, wages have stagnated, and even employment has been, in some of the heavy industrial areas, has stagnated as well. So how do you account for that? That there's more production, but there are fewer people. You would think that there would be a commensurate where there'd be more people employed, but the reality is that it's automation, and the digital industry is basic. This is where what's happened over the past few years is that the level of the digital industry has took a giant leap in knowledge and our ability to be able to automate things. That's what's going to happen over the next 5 to 7 years, is that they've found different and more powerful ways to do automation in a way that we've never even imagined before. That's where you're going to start to see jobs become obsolete. And that's where we're going to happen, not just here. I mean, the projections here is that 47% of all the jobs that we know will be gone by 2030. In China, it's up to like 80%. In other parts, in Ethiopia, I think it's like 85. I mean, it's happening all over the world because businesses get to the point of saying this new digital wave that we're emerging into is now makes it cheaper for me to do the work. They used to just move the jobs over to China or some other place and say, this is cheaper. Now they can say, we'll move it back to the United States and just automate everything. It is an opportunity, however, for us to create something else. And that's why we are here. Those of us who have all of this experience, our job is to think about another way forward inside of a society that is in the midst of rapid change. We have the skills. We just have to choose. We have to choose courage, quite frankly. We have to be courageous.
Over here. Question over here.
Yes.
Hi. Observation and a question. If half the world is unemployed, there won't be any consumers for the people producing all the digital product, it seems to me. But I'm interested in what the title of your book is that you referred to.
Yes. The name of my book is Above and Beyond All That We Know, How to Thrive and Succeed in the Current World Paradigm Shift. And that's a very good question. I'm not sure. Here's my concern, is that I'm not sure if the people who are engaged in this process are thinking this thing through. The more people that are not employed, how do you maintain societal structure? I don't think that they've thought it through, but however, I do think that we on the ground level have an opportunity to start to think these things through. I mean, there are questions like, what do we do in a world what will people do in a world where all of a sudden employment is not necessarily necessary for the whole aspect of living. We've been doing employment for the past 200 years. We believe that that is how humankind processes its way through life. But that's not, the 9 to 5 is not a part of the thousands of years prior to the Industrial Revolution. We just assume that everybody did that kind of thing, but that's just not true. So we have to rethink the whole aspect of humanity. And I don't want to make it too big, because I think we need to keep it small and say, what are we going to do in this room going forward? So that's a good question. I can say that. Yes, sir.
Have you done any work on the future of physical currency, specifically paper and coins? Does that have a long runway in your estimation?
Yes. There is this wonderful movement toward Bitcoin. Anybody familiar with it? Well, Bitcoin and what they call open source currency is starting to take hold. And I think you're going to see a great conversation about that because of the Panama Papers, quite frankly. That's my personal belief. That the Panama Papers are going to present an opportunity for people to say, you know, if we have open source Bitcoin, new kinds of currency that allows for international trade, we won't have these kinds of fraudulent, tax-based robbing situations that are occurring all around the world. So yes, you might want to Google it if you get the opportunity to see the latest development on Bitcoin. Yes. Whoops. Okay. Okay, one last question, I think.
I had a question about youth. And our working with youth, I see that there's so much multitasking done, particularly with texting, that particularly in the high school level, where there's this drop in relationship between the human beings, young people, or with adults and young people. Much more difficult for young people, I think, to have powerful conversations with their peers and also with adults.
Yes.
So could you comment about that?
Absolutely. Let me make this real quick because I see my hook is standing. Okay. Dan and I are doing that level of work. That's the one thing that I truly can say I absolutely treasure our friendship. It's because Dan was saying, if these changes are happening, what the heck are we doing in the schools? If we're not at least developing our students to, I mean, if we're training our students to go to jobs that won't even exist in the next few years, what does that say about us? We should at least be talking about a bigger, more expansive capacity for young people so that they can do something greater. And I think Dan has been really adamant about that we have to rethink how we're thinking about education from its foundation. We have to, otherwise we are the ones that they will blame years from now and say, you saw this coming and we didn't do better. We can do better. We have the ability to do better. So yes, that is a conversation with Dan and some other people. And
one more.
I was going to ask how you saw the future of education. So sounds like you're still not sure, but you think it's got to be rethought.
It basically, that is the real key, is that it has to be rethought and it has to be expanded beyond just it's teaching to the test, which is madness, quite frankly. This is my personal opinion. I'm not sure if Dan shares this, but I'll just say teaching to the test is madness. In a time when the world is about to emerge into this great place, we're just teaching people how to make sure that they do rote memory. And I was just suggesting earlier that the greatest thing that we can teach is help young people how to become the greatest learners in the history of humanity so that they can have the capacity to take in all of these great ideas and decide a way forward for humanity. I mean, we have to think about it in a big, big context, but yet keep it small enough so that our kids can say, oh yeah, we can do that. We can do it. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Stay right here, please.